Well, hey guys, welcome to another podcast with the Path of Purpose with me and Desi. We have a special episode that I'm pretty excited about. My parents are on this episode, and I'm very excited for you guys all to meet them. So, with my father, Lance, and my mother, Patricia, is here. Pat and Lance, as we call them, are mom and dad. And
Grandpa.
I learned a lot from them growing up. And I thought it would be awesome for us to discuss childhood and relationships. They've been together. How long have you guys been together now? Married?
38 years.
38 years.
Married 38 years. And
38 years.
And it's been 41 years that we've been together.
Yeah, so 41 years together. That's hard to find. We don't hear about that anymore. And so that'd be nice to share a little bit of their story and how they managed 41 years together. You know, we all go through life, and this is the life of them. And I'm sure we're all going to take a lot from this. And it's special to me because I've not got to sit down with my dad and my mom and have a conversation like this. And so, you know, they're the best parents on this planet. And obviously, we didn't always feel that way growing up. But I have a lot of respect. My dad, you know, as a father, has really, really shown me a lot of wisdom and patience. And I didn't realize how much it meant to me until, past couple of years. And they're kind of our role models. So I would like to get them on the mic and be able to share a little what's going on. So, I thought we could just share how you guys met. I'd like to discuss a little bit about the church and how that happened in our life, and how you guys were able to do it with the trial and the errors and the mistakes that we all make. Me and Desi have been together 18 years. And you guys have been a big part of those 18 years through our wonderful dumpster fire of a journey. But I really would like to hear what you want to say, and I know a lot of people would too. So you can summarize a lot of things. How did you meet?
Lance was my car mechanic. I bought a foreign car that needed a whole lot of work, and so I took it into his shop because it was nearby, and I saw him every paycheck for months getting my car repaired.
Fell for him there, huh?
Yeah, well, he was so sweet. I was working night shift, and I would drop my car off in the morning, and I would walk home. That's why I picked that shop. And he started feeling sorry for me, so he would take me home in my car, and then he'd bring my car back. And then it came to the point where he would come pick me up, take me back to the shop so I could pay for it. Aww. And then it progressed into, I think I actually asked him out.
Yep.
Really?
Well, what happened is she said, you should come by sometime. Stop by anytime. And it was a Sunday. It was my 21st birthday. And I was I was a real shy guy, okay? Not scared of girls, okay? And never really dated. And, I just moved to Tucson, and I really didn't know hardly anybody here. And so Sunday afternoon, I thought, well, she said stop by sometime, and I'm really lonely, so I stopped by her house, and obviously I woke her up, and so she comes to the door, and I don't know what to say, and she says, "Do you want to come in?" It's like, okay, and she says, "You want a glass of iced tea?" Okay. And then we really didn't talk much. I said, okay, well, it's good to see you. And I left.
And
And
that was it.
that was a Sunday. And the following Friday, just before quitting time, she called the shop. They paged me to the phone. And she just said, well, you know, it was really nice to see you. Nice to have you stop by. And it just hit me, you know what? I'll bet she's as lonely as I am. And so I asked her if she wanted to do something that night. And so we wound up going to the Flandrau Planetarium Dark Side of the Moon Pink Floyd show.
Yep.
And then after that, I took her home and we wound up standing out on her lawn, talking, and then she suggested, you want to, because the car that she had bought was a 76 Fiat 124 Spider convertible. Fun little car. So she said, do you want to drive up Mount Lemmon in the convertible? It's like, okay. And it was probably like 10 o'clock at this point. And so we went up to Windy Point and hung out there for a little bit. And then we came back down and stood out on her lawn talking. And it's a little fuzzy from there, but I think we sat down and started talking. The next thing we know, we're both waking up on our front lawn, the sun's in our eyes. and we started dating from there.
And you had Ben and my older brother Ben in 88?
Yeah, we married,
April of 87.
yep. And after 6 months, I was scared to death something was wrong because she wasn't pregnant. But she says, no, it can take time.
Well, from there, we had an awesome childhood. Me and my brothers, my dad took us everywhere. He had a sand rail that he built. We spent our whole life outdoors. You know, he built computers and we did have computer games, but we lived life like I feel all kids should now. And I didn't realize how big of a deal that was until, I don't know, a couple of years ago, because that's my whole life and that's how I'm raising my son. So we had a great childhood, but you were heavily involved in the church. And if I recall, Grandpa was a traveling.
At that time, he was working for Prison Fellowship.
Okay.
And, you know, was always going into the prisons and doing in-prison seminars and stuff like that. And
Yeah, he was a preacher. And when they
Yeah.
were young, he and his wife and her sister went to revivals and sang.
yeah, they traveled all over as the West Coast Trio to, you know, camp meetings, tent meetings, stuff like that. And so I kind of grew up sitting in the front pew watching my dad. You know, he was always leading the songs and stuff, and you know, eventually he let me use my mom's ukulele, and so I'd sit in the front row and watch his fingers as he played guitar and try to do the same thing on the uke, and that's how I learned to play.
I remember we grew up in the church. That's not my favorite memory. You know, we've talked a lot about this, you know, Dad and Mom, and about, you know, what I feel like the church did to me. It gave me a real sour taste in my mouth. And, you know, the church we were part of felt more like a religious cult than it did a place of worship or healing. You felt very judged and all that fun stuff, but it played into kind of our family life because you were really in depth. up and through our teenage years. And then, when Desi moved in at 15, that can't imagine how you guys handled that. But there was
Wait, go back. What do you mean you can't imagine?
if I had a son and his wife moving in at 15 years old, that'd be very difficult for me to handle.
Oh.
And so the patience was there. But I remember you kind of sat us all down. And, all of us kind of didn't want to go to church anymore. We were very upset with how it's just taken over our life. What came over you to sit us all down and have that conversation? As basically what it was is, we're not going to church anymore.
The thing is, there's so much backstory to that. It's like I felt God's presence from a young boy, and I didn't really realize it was Him really talking to me, but when I was in grade school, I believe that He showed me that He had called me for a purpose, and that it was going to be different from anybody else that I knew. And He showed me such love that how could I not love Him back? And so it's like my whole life was, my focus in life was serving God. And I think it was in fifth grade when He showed me that it's like He used something that I saw about the military, and how that I wasn't going to get to be like the civilians that get to do whatever they want. And I wasn't going to get to be like the regular military that is treated fairly, that He talked to me about special forces and the hardship and the suffering that they have to go through. And He said, He told me that was going to be my life, to prepare me for His purpose for me. And so it's like that was like nonstop all through. There was a period of time when I was in high school when He wouldn't let me do anything without me asking Him first. And so, He really, and I was, I was so happy to be in that relationship with Him. And I didn't have any idea what the purpose was, because I could never see myself as a preacher or a minister or anything like that, and so when I met Mom, she had just had bad experiences with religion, and we would spend hours just sitting, and I had gone through a period of time where this might be getting too deep.
No.
No, if you don't want to discuss it, we don't have to. We can.
No, I would, but this is, I guess, where we were coming from is, all I knew was I wanted to serve God, and I knew that He had a purpose, but also He wouldn't let me get away with anything. Okay, all the other boys, man, they get in fights, they do everything. It's like if I would have hurt somebody, my heart would have hurt so bad. It's like, and it's like I could never do anything wrong because I felt so guilty, and my conscience was so sensitive, okay? And, I thought later I was mad at my dad because I thought he wouldn't let me fight and be a regular boy, But, one particular instance when I was in 5th grade, and there were these 3 brothers that were terrors. They were all into boxing and martial arts and stuff, and they were bullies. And one of them set his sights on me, and had let it known that the next day, when I was going home from school, he was going to beat me up. And so I told my dad about it, and he said, well, you know what the Bible says? That, about loving those that hate us and, praying for those. And so that night, I just prayed for that kid that whatever his hurts were, God would meet him, that God would bless him. And so the next day, I get into lunch line, and all of a sudden I realize he's right in front of me, and it's like, how did I not see this? How did I get this close to him and not see this? And he's talking with his friend about go-karts. And I don't know what possessed me, but I said, I have a go-kart. I just took 3 2x4s and bolted them together and put axle with wheels on them and a rope to steer, and that's what I going down the hills on with. And he's like, you do? Really, you do? Oh, can I be your friend? And he grabbed my hand and said, oh, I won't let anybody pick on you. I'm going to be your friend. And it's like, that was the last I had any trouble,
Wow.
in that school. But later I was mad at my dad, thinking that he didn't let me grow up. But God took me through a whole bunch of memories and showed me that no, it was my choice, and I just always choose Him. But in that situation, I got proud that I was a good person, and knowing how God hates pride, I just kept praying, God, deal with me, deal with this pride, I know that it can't be pleasing to you. And it's like, when you think you're better than others, you can't do anything about it. It's something deep, And so I just kept praying, and I always imagined, okay, how's God going to do it? And at that, I was a very active kid, so I thought becoming a quadriplegic, stuck in a wheelchair, can't feed myself, can't move, can't do anything, that's the worst thing that could happen. And I told God, yeah, even that, God, even if that's what it takes, I need you to clean my heart. need to get rid of this. Well, and it's like this was a constant thing for me till I think I was 19, and all of a sudden, God quit talking to me, just out of the blue. All of a sudden, I couldn't hear him, I couldn't see him, and I went to the pastor and prayed for me, and nothing, and it was actually, I went through a period where I was thinking, well, God has finally just rejected me because of my pride. And so I thought, well, heck, if there's no chance of going to heaven now, I might as well do bad stuff, But I never could bring myself to do anything that, And so anyway, this was in Montana, and I lost my job in the middle of January in 84. And real depressed economy at that time, and no jobs. And I was, during that period when God was not talking to me, you remember Matthew Broderick in that movie Lady Hawk, where he's always just, well, God, what should I do now? And he's always just talking to God, and it was just him talking to himself, basically. And it's like, that's kind of what I was doing during that time. And I was like, well, God, what now? And he said, move to Tucson. And it's like, whoa, God, is that you? And he says, yeah, move to Tucson. I just thought it was amazing that he would accept me back, But he used that time to burn something out of me that needed to go. And so when I moved here, I met her, 4 months after I moved here? And so I was still raw, and being rejected by God during that time, I kind of lost everything that I believed in. And so I was really slowly trying to figure out what's true. And so her and I would just sit and we'd talk for hours, and I would just tell her my experiences, what I'd seen God do, things, and what I was thinking, and during that time she became a believer.
But you didn't grow up that way, right? I mean, you didn't grow up in a religious household?
No, my grandparents went to church. It was a Lutheran church, very rule-oriented. I went through like catechism and stuff, but I was done because all I saw, I was raised in a very small town, so I saw these people and how they acted on Sunday, and then I knew how they lived during the week and the judgment and the stuff. So after I did that catechism thing at 15, I told my mom, I will not be going to church anymore. I don't,
Did you reject it, or you just didn't want to be part of it?
My only exposure to God was the religious stuff. We were like a step down from Catholicism. So it was just, you played your part, you did your stuff, you said your whatevers. And so I never really had a relationship with God. And so I just I just told my mom, all I see is hypocrisy, and I don't need that. So it's not like I was real angry or anything about it, but it was kind of like, if this is what religion is, I don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't want it.
So then when you met Dad and all of that stuff, how did that work in your relationship?
Well, when I met him, I had been divorced for like maybe 6 months or whatever, and I didn't know what was truth. I mean, I was starting to question all of life. I can't trust myself, obviously. I don't make good decisions. And so I think we were both kind of raw, and that we were really seeking what's true. We got to have something to hold on to. So, what is it? And God touched me.
So we just kind of took that journey together, huh?
Yeah.
I've never asked that question before. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. Well, then you had us disasters to come in your life and just make things just dandy.
Well, the thing is, when Dad and I were, going to get married, we really thought that we were going to become missionaries. And the church we were attending to at the time was going to send us as missionaries, because we thought the perfect couple, a guy who can fix everything and a nurse. I mean, we're.
Yeah.
And God said, no. Why don't you stay home and buy a house and start a family?
Yeah, which blew our minds.
Which blew our minds, because we thought.
We couldn't believe that God.
I mean, we were all ready.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, boy, we're going to be able to go and see the world, and we're going to, use our talents and serve God and stuff. And he's like, no. You just go buy a house and start your family.
Yeah, and just get a job.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was not even in my imagination that's what God would, that I felt like he was just putting us on a shelf, But and every time we tried to move or do something different, he was like, nope, you stay right there. And
I remember when I was just dating you.
Don't look at me. Like,
When I was just dating Adam, and you guys were in the middle of possibly moving from the house, and you guys were looking at houses. I remember even going with you up to a couple of them.
Yeah.
And I hadn't moved in at that point. I was just dating Adam, and so it was. And I remember hearing, it was the first time you guys all sat around the table, and then I was on the couch, and I remember how you guys were. It was the first time I witnessed a family unit, and you guys were all making decisions together. And you were saying, okay, God is telling me that I need to raise our purchase price. And you guys were worried about that and how you're going to afford it. And I just remember being there and was like, oh my gosh, I just hit the jackpot. I'm so excited, because I didn't have people to share. I mean, I was able to share it with my mom, but I kept my relationship just so private, because it was the only thing that I could control. And I remember you texted me and was like, hey, and you were like, my dad wants to know if you want to go to church with us. And because you weren't sure how I would receive it. And I was like, absolutely. And then I got to go to church with you guys.
well, I legitimately didn't want to go, so.
Well, I legitimately wanted to go. And I was very excited to go.
Well, you know what's crazy is, it's like I could not understand my three boys. That I actually thought they were rejecting God, but I later realized that no, you're just rejecting religion. And when you're in the middle of Christianity, you're in the middle of the church, participating in everything, you don't, it seems normal to you, okay? And, really, you three boys and her, God used you guys. Part of it was that, I had that, I don't know how I got it wrong, but I thought it was my job to shape you boys into the image of Christ Jesus. And so, I was trying to shape you into what I thought you should be, which means there was a lot of judgment there. And, growing up in the church, it's like you can't have right and wrong without judgment, okay? That,
I love that. That's a really good point.
so, and I was so steeped in right and wrong that, and I know that's people who are caught in religion, it's an innocent thing that, trying to honor God in what's right and wrong and getting caught in the judgment side of it and not recognizing it or not seeing a way out of it. And, it's the difference between the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. And so, you guys were rebelling against all that. And I could not understand it because I thought you were rebelling against God. And I remember the one time when, I'd just been crying out to God, what do I do? How do I handle this? And it felt like he just grabbed me by my throat and shoved me up against the wall and said, get your hands off those boys. He says, it's my job to shape them into who I called them to be, not yours. Your job is to love them and be a good example to them. And that's it. And I was like, that was huge. It was huge. And so, as soon as I recognized what I had done, I went and I confessed to the boys and I apologized for trying to force them to be something that God didn't create them to be. And they were all rebelling against me. Adam is the one that told me, we're not like you, Dad. We don't ever want to be like you. We can't wait till we grow up and can move away.
Yep.
And it's like, that and what else was going on with the boys, it was like such a wake-up call to me. And so then, I told them, obviously I don't know how to be a good dad. And so I'm going to quit telling you guys what to do. And would you guys help me learn to be a good dad? Tell me what you need from me as a dad.
But that right there is a good dad.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, we learned a lot from that too. You're talking about, what God told you. And it's like, just hearing that, even at that age, how old was I? 17? 16? I was dating you. I think I was 17.
Yeah, no, I remember all this.
Yeah, I think you just started dating when that...
It was heartbreaking because none of us felt like you were a bad dad. But it was relieving seeing that you heard us. Heard, not hurt. And that moment, it's been a long time, but that moment gave me a freedom to ask questions and I always told you, why can't you just be a dad and not a preacher?
Yeah.
Why can't you just be a normal dad? And if I bring a problem to you, you tell me, "Oh, I'm sorry, son." Kids picking on me. Why can't you tell me to go beat them up instead of throwing a Bible verse or a prayer or something? It was hard for me. But in hindsight, that's all you knew at that point forward. And so, from that point forward, I mean, we all were like, "Whoa, really? Like, are we getting set up here? Where's this?" And everything changed. There was no church on Sunday. You even started talking differently.
Well, it was right after that God told me, quit going to church. And it's like, I thought he just meant for one Sunday. And so, and then I thought, okay, well, if we're not going to go to church, then we'll just have our own church service here at home. And God said, the hell you will. It's like, oh, no? Okay, well, what am I going to do? Nothing. And it's like, he was just blowing my mind left and right during that time. And then also, I realized I'd been so busy trying to shape you boys that I didn't even know who you were. And so I just started praying, just crying out to God every single day. God, help me see who these boys are. Help me to know what to affirm in them. Help me to see things, because in religion, all you see is what's wrong, Mm-hmm. And so that's what you boys were growing up under, I mean, I loved you, and you knew that I loved you, but you really mostly heard about what you did wrong,
You didn't feel accepted. Like, I remember you always saying that.
Well, we were alone. So it was, my dad's life was church, Bible study, prayer, helping everybody else. He was a great dad. He did things with us on Sundays and stuff, but, like with Bowen. If Bowen comes up to me and he's sad and something's wrong, and I just grab him and I hug him, and because I know that something's wrong. I don't feel like I had that.
Yeah.
It was a prayer. Well, it sounds like,
I'd logic it out with them.
Yeah, from a biblical standpoint.
Yeah.
And so, it was just a lack of that.
And I think part of it too was me and my siblings weren't really allowed to feel feelings, okay? It was always, you straighten up your attitude, And we learned self-control. Mm-hmm. We didn't learn to deal with our feelings, okay? Yeah. And that's what I did to you boys. It was always, straighten up your attitude. Quit crying, You need to get over this. And instead of like what you guys do, you help Bowen work through his feelings. And I wish that I would have understood that. But I did God started showing me things. And I started affirming you guys. And that was about the same time as I heard a teaching about the difference between identity and behavior. And it took me months chewing on that. I kept asking God, I feel like I'm still not getting something here. And finally, I got it. That it's like, perfect example, the one time with you that, I was having a lot of trouble with you lying. And I remember, do you mind if I share that?
I don't know what you're talking about, but go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Well, one time I was so frustrated, I told you, I'd rather have a dead son than a son who's a liar. Okay? And it's like, I can't even imagine. I'm horrified that came out of my mouth. But
Do you remember that?
that was my frustration, okay, with you just lied all the time. And I got it one day, the difference between identity and behavior. And always before, you were a liar. You need to quit being a liar. Well, when a problem is tied to who you are, you can't change who you are, so you can't change the behavior because the behavior is who you are. And one day you lied to me right after I got it. And I said, hey, buddy, I know you. I know you're an honorable, honest man. And this isn't who you are. But you just told me a lie. And I'm just wondering, where did that come from? Because that's not who you are. And you were like, I don't know. And I said, well, can we ask God about it? And you said, yeah. And so we asked God about it right then. And he reminded you of an incident, I think in second grade, shortly after we put you guys in public school, and the teacher asked you a question, you told the truth, and all the kids laughed and made fun of you. And you decided that if that's what telling the truth gets me, I'm not doing that again. And then God just talked to you about it. And that was the last time I ever had to deal with you lying, you know? And it was like, when I called you a liar, I was
Labeling.
yeah, and I was giving you no way to change because I was tying your identity to your behavior.
Yeah.
But once I understood that your identity is perfect, is honorable, is respectful, that's your identity. But sometimes your pain, whatever, causes you to do something that doesn't measure up to that. And as soon as I got that, it's like that changed a lot for us.
Yeah. I remember as a kid, I was probably the biggest hurdle for you. And I didn't always like you.
Yeah.
And I remember I would tell you and I would tell Mom. And I know it was probably very difficult.
And you're my biggest blessing, because I think you and I were so different in some ways, but in other ways we're very alike.
Yeah.
And I think God used you more than anybody to confront me, to call me on even double standards, I think it was you that called me on a double standard that I didn't even realize I had. And, I was always talking to you guys about being honorable and respectful and all of that. And then you called me out on, I don't even remember what it was. But there was something else. There was one other thing that really had an impact on me. I heard a guy say once that as a father, you're the gatekeeper to the home. No sin, no crookedness, no warped thinking can get into your home except by way of you. So, and this was about the same time. And so, if you see something that's ugly in one of your kids, you're the one that brought it in the house. And
Wow.
And so the disrespect, and this was before that. I saw that, okay? And I'd been praying about the disrespect, you three boys disrespecting each other, And here I thought I was the most respectful person there was, But I was totally blind to the form my disrespect took, which was not accepting you for who you are and trying to force you to be what I wanted you to be. I mean, what greater, how can you disrespect a person more than that, you know? And that's what I was doing. And so, you know, it's no wonder you boys struggled with that all through your childhood. And so basically what I started doing is every time I saw something ugly in you, any of you, I just started saying, God, forgive me for that. Please expose that in me and deal with me. That's not his disrespect, that's mine. I brought it into this house.
Wow.
God, deal with me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's...
And he did. I mean, I had a lot of revelations.
How did you handle that, Mom? I mean, the difficult times between us kids and religion. And I mean, I know I was always a mama's boy. And so I was the one that would come up and address concerns, and you would address
Yeah,
concerns with me privately. And
I think because of my background, I saw some of these issues that weren't the best. But being so deeply in that religious thing, there wasn't a whole lot I could do about it, other than when we were home alone. I wanted you guys to be who you are, you know, because I felt very judged and crushed too, that I wasn't accepted for who I was either. I had to look a certain way and act a certain way. And so when we were home, I wanted you guys to be kids. I wanted you to question, you to be free. And so that was kind of my focus when it was just us, was that I eased off on a lot of those judgments and religious things, and just because I wanted to be free too. So I thought, here's our time together to be just who we are, you know, within the realm of not being mean or anything, or you know, judgmental to others, but to be able to let our hair down and not have to play a part, to just be. And so I think that's why, especially that's kind of your personality and why we click so much, because I let you be. And I could see things of each one of you, of where your talents and desires were and stuff, and to try to encourage those. And so sometimes it was a struggle between Dad and I, because when you guys were really miserable, I was really miserable too.
yeah,
And really,
Luckily, we got involved in some para-ministries that actually brought a lot of healing, personal healing to us.
Yeah.
Where we got a lot of these revelations that we could apply, because we realized that, I mean, I was done going to church too. It was like, when I go to church, I feel beat up. And I don't want that.
Yeah.
I mean, that, to me, if that's what God and religious section is, I wanted God, but I didn't want religion anymore. I wanted to see God as loving and accepting and and not have all these rules and ways to act, behavior.
And did you guys receive, like, how did you feel? Was it from people at church that was judging you, or was it you're judging yourself? Like, if you were in church, was it you're judging yourself? Or did you experience?
I think it was a
people in the
little
church?
bit of both.
Uh-huh. Or was it with the family, like the other women in the family, or?
Oh, definitely. I mean, living right along the street and going to the same church and stuff,
Yeah, so Adam's whole family lived on the exact same street.
most of my family.
Most, yeah. Yeah. And now these days, like, everyone wants to get to that point and they want to have a compound, you know? And I always think, gosh, I saw the beauty in the family being together, but then I did see, because of like the deep religious spirit that was going on, that of how toxic it really was, how bad it was,
Well, and one,
the bondage that all of you were in.
I mean, one of the biggest reasons I wanted you guys on this podcast is because what you've gone through the church, it's like the amount of respect I have. I mean, we have a great relationship now, but it's like the amount of respect I have for you guys coming from that to these revelations and who you guys are. I mean, advice. If you were to do things differently, what advice would you give somebody that's in the same position? Let's say, Dad, someone that's just stuck in church and religion.
The thing is, you can't see it when you're in it. And really, it was the suffering of you three boys and Mom and her telling me how much you guys hated church, and her telling me that she was, she just felt beat up, you know, when she'd go to church. And that was what led to me, you know, crying out to God, God, what do I do? I don't know what to do here, you know? And because I'll bet you were talking to me about that really heavy, serious for probably 6 months before I got to the point of desperation, and I think probably I had to get to the point of desperation to actually accept God telling me to quit going to church. And
So let's say someone in your position, right, that can't see it, but listen.
Here's the problem as I see it now, is that most people go to church, join religious organizations, because they're looking, they feel empty, they want God, and they're going there looking for Him in sincerity, you know? And the thing is, you can find God at church, okay? Any denomination, you can find God there. He'll, you know, I mean, if you were going to a bar to try to find God, you would find Him there, you know? But people are going to churches, and the thing is, there's beautiful things mixed in with the law, okay? And I wish we could get to the place where everybody just learn to hear the voice of God for themselves and just follow what God says to them, not what God said to you or
About you.
yeah.
What God said to me about you.
That always
Yeah.
took me. That was one of the things that I really would ask Him. How, I mean, obviously God can talk through other people to you, and so I totally understand that.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. But I was so used to having my own relationship with God. And I remember asking you one time, okay, well, which God's right? My God or your God?
Mm-hmm.
If we walk away from this conversation, which God's going to be right? And you were totally honest. You're like, my God. It's like, yeah. And that was like a light bulb clicked for you too. And it was, but we're all equipped to hear Him here. We have to listen and drown out the outer noise. Yeah.
Well, and that was another thing that with the boys, when I felt this was all happening around the same time, that I was so concerned with you boys getting into drugs and promiscuity and all of that stuff. And to me, that was like the worst thing that could happen. Because I was a virgin when I met Mom, and that was just something that I expected people who want to honor God would save it for their spouse. And this one time I was praying to God, saying, God, protect my boys from this and from that, and, don't let them get caught in this or that. And he just ran me through, how you can see a whole bunch of scenarios in a split second. He ran me through a whole bunch of bad things that happened in my life that shaped me. And then he said, would you have me rob your boys? And it's like I knew exactly what he was saying. That if he prevented you from having these bad things happen, it's like, basically, was I going to trust him to guide your path, even if it went through drugs and promiscuity? Okay, was I going to trust him? And it's like that was a turning point also, that was the last time. From that time since, the only prayer I have for you boys, and you girls also, is, God, I bless you to do everything that's in your heart concerning Adam, concerning Desiree. You fulfill to the fullest what your plan is for them, and I trust you. I trust you to keep them, and I trust you in them. And basically just affirming that relationship, and because I realized what I was doing was, it was fear. I was basically saying, God, whatever your plan is, I think it's a bad plan, and don't do it. So
That was a very freeing revelation, especially with teenagers.
Yeah.
Because, in your teen years is when you're learning independence and judgment and, making your own decisions and things like that. And, a parent's natural thing is to want to protect you from everything. And, to hear God say, you would prevent me from taking them on the path that I have designed for them. Yeah. And it's like, no.
Wow.
And so that was so freeing, because, so many people ask me, it's like, how did you sleep at night? 3 boys. And it's like, that brought such peace, because it's like, no matter what path you took, I knew that God had his hand on you. And so, and there's no wrong path. We all have a separate path. And so, to be able to just bless that God would take you on your path and to trust him for his protection over you. Because so much, it's not only the good stuff we do, but it's a lot of the poor decisions that we make that really develop who we are as people.
Teach you the most.
And so it's like, I don't want bad things to happen, but it's kind of like, if that's the path that you need to take to get there, then I bless you to do that. Even though it may look like poor decisions in my eyes, it's like, that's what you need. And to see how all 3 of you guys are such amazing men. It's like, I would tell any parent, to do that. Don't see everything as this terrible thing that's going to ruin their life. It's like, trust God. He's got them on the path, and let them experience that path.
But this all did happen about, it seems like this all
We had
happened
like
within
about-
a period of a year.
Now, we had about 2 or 3 years. where
Maybe
it's
2 or
just
3
like
years? Okay.
revelation after instruction and applying it, to being able to, because so many times you feel like you don't know what to do. You don't know what to do. And so when a revelation comes like that, you can just embrace it and let it go.
And see, part of the me trying to shape you boys and God telling me to get my hands off you, part of that was making the decision that I was going to trust God in you. That I didn't need to watch out for you anymore.
Parent, it's probably hard to do. I mean, I'm putting myself in that position with Bowen, and I mean, I'm a little bit different. I mean, I know that he has his own path and I don't control it. But I also don't want to turn him into something that I think he should be. I want him to have the freedom to make mistakes. Yeah. And he's just like me. He has to learn by making the mistake. So, the freedom's there, but at the same time, it's hard not to worry. I mean,
well, it's hard to watch.
Yeah.
When you know what the consequences are going to be, to let that experience, but it's like, that's how you learn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys were like, what do they call that, golden retriever parents? Is that what they say? Like the best parents you could have?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like golden retriever husband.
Yeah, whatever.
And you're the best husband in the whole world, but you're like a different type of dog. I'm the golden retriever in the relationship.
But he's more like the Mastiff or something.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know. There's probably a word for it. There's probably a certain dog. But.
Well, in your guys' relationship, in your marriage, because this podcast is a lot about that. It's a lot about our story, the things we've learned, what could we have done better, how we've handled depression within our relationship, how we've handled this in our relationship. How did you guys do it for 41 years? How are you still together?
I feel like that's a whole nother podcast, baby.
Okay, cool.
I'm telling you, that's
It is.
That's a big, yeah. You'd asked the question earlier about, what I'd say to somebody caught in religion. And the thing is, we're all different. And there are some that they find their fulfillment in the church. And pure hearts, no judgment, but that's where they belong, And then you have others that can only go so far in the church and then start feeling like there's something wrong, there's something missing here. And so it's like everybody has their own path, and it's going to be unique to them. It's nobody else is going to have the exact same path, And so what I would say is listen to your heart. I mean, this is where God talks to us, okay? This is where the enemy talks to us. And this is where all the right and wrong and judgment and all of that happen, okay? This is where you force yourself to that place of quietness where you can feel God and hear Him here. And And it's like, to everybody, I would say, quiet your mind and just sit in silence before God and just ask Him to speak to you, and then follow what you hear, what you sense, you know? And don't let the fears and the what ifs, you know, or the shoulds or I ought to, none of that stuff. All of that stuff, I mean, Jesus
Or
came
other people.
to free us from all that stuff.
Well, so, and I know, okay, I get a lot where you can't follow your heart because your heart is deceitful. And I am still working through this with God because I can understand, but my question is, well, Jesus, you live in my heart. How can it be deceitful? But I do. That is one of the biggest things that I get that I'm still trying to unpack with God. From people that are in the church. Now, to me, going every Sunday, I could go to church every single day of my life. I could pray 24/7. That sounds amazing to me. That sounds horrendous to him. But he'll tell me, no, the church would eat you alive. Like, you would go there to worship and you're not, it's not the
You would
same.
get sucked into stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what he says. Like, you would get.
Oh, really? Yeah, because I know that's what would happen with you.
Yeah. But I wouldn't care. Like,
I know.
would be so excited about it.
I know.
Get sucked in. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't care.
And it would be a year or two down the road before you realized, wait, what am I doing?
Yeah.
This isn't what I wanted.
Yeah.
But, and that's what I was taught when I was young. Okay, I think that was really common that, you can't trust your heart, And it's like, I call bullshit. I mean, that's from the Antichrist, It's like, okay, think about it. If we look at the two trees in the garden, okay, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, okay, that's all here. That's all here. Or the tree of life, okay, that's all here.
Yeah.
And it's like, most people already know this, but what religion has done is it's put the intellect as the intellect is the boss, and the heart has to submit to the intellect. And that is completely backwards. That's completely backwards. That, we have to quiet our mind. We have to force our mind and our intellect to submit, because that's where all of the whatever dark spiritual influences there are, that's where they access us, is the intellect. Nope, they cannot. The spirit, the heart, whatever you call that, that's where, the Spirit of God moves in us. And he's very soft and gentle and quiet. And if the enemy can get our mind stirred up, that's the end of us here. It's like we have to force this to quiet. And we use this, but it has to be submitted to the heart. And I was taught backwards of that. And
Yeah, I think this is where religion is. This is all religion in the brain, in your mind, in your thought, in your intellect. And your heart is believer.
one of the things that always bothered me in the church is the people who could memorize scripture really good and all of that were celebrated. But, that woman that had that little lady that had the sweetest heart and just prayed for everybody. And it's like, you know, in the hierarchy of the church, the hierarchy of the church is completely upside down.
Oh, I agree.
Would you ever start your own church?
No, because I'm to the place, there's only one thing that should be taught. Every preacher out there should be teaching one thing, and that's how do you hear God for yourself. And you know, and then just let me encourage you and tell me what God's telling you and see if the Spirit in me witnesses that that's correct. And it's like, let me celebrate with you that you're on the path that God is calling you to.
How beautiful would it be if that's how churches were?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're not.
See, the problem is with religion, there's all these rights and wrongs, okay? Well, you think about Abraham. If he was in our church today and he said, oh, God told me to take my son, my only son, up the hill and make a sacrifice. And it's like, well, what are you going to sacrifice? I don't know. My son, if that's what I have to. It's like, they would think that this guy is, I mean, all those guys that we say are heroes in the Old Testament, it's like, they would not fit in to our church. They'd say, oh no, you're wrong, you know? Because, you know, if you're following the Spirit of God, He asks you to do things that don't fit. Don't fit.
Yeah.
It's like one time I had a boss that he wanted me to lie. We had to go to court. He wanted me to lie. And I was all indignant. It's like, you know, there's no way I'm going to lie, you know. Who do you think you are telling me to lie? And I was all up in arms of what I was going to do. And all of a sudden I realized that God wasn't happy with me. And I was like, what God? And he says, and he reminded me of that verse that servants serve your masters as if they are God, you know, as if you're serving God. And I was like, but he's telling me, does that matter? And I was like, you mean you want me to obey him and lie in court? And he just reminded me of that verse again. And it's like, it was hard, but I had to humble myself and say, okay, God, even if that's what happens, I will submit to my boss. And that broke something in me, a sense of pride. I had a pride that I was an honest person, you know. And the next day, all of a sudden I realize, wait, we're late for court. And I go to my boss and he says, oh, it got settled. And it's like, maybe all that was to deal with my indignation and sense of pride that I was an honest person. But it's like God used me having to submit to maybe doing something that everybody in the church would for sure say, oh, that can't be God, you know. But
I hope that there is many parts to this because there's so much depth to you guys, or with you guys and with us, and how you've been that support in our marriage as well. So I know one thing is that I can sense when God has his hands on people and loves them deeply. And there's just something about your guys' family that's amazing. And to see how all three of your boys are incredible humans.
Yeah, you guys did something right.
Yeah, even though like there's so much that you guys feel you did wrong, the simple fact that you can even sit here and acknowledge it, you know, or think about, okay, you take responsibility, you know.
Your father figure in our life, you sacrificed without us knowing. We didn't understand it. But both of you sacrificed. I mean, you talk about I'm obviously not a good father. That broke our heart because it's like out of 100%, what's 100% is the best dad on the planet, you were a 90%. But that 10% was a wedge between everything else. And so
It was pretty huge.
It was, but
It's a big deal.
It was absolutely incredible to see the 360-degree change in our family. And it's like, I am who I am because of you and because of Mom. And so it's like the things that we've learned is just, it's beautiful. And I didn't realize it until, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it's been. And so, you guys have been a blessing, not only to us, but everybody, my friends, everybody. And so I want the world to hear a little bit about you and a little bit about your story. And I know we can sit here and talk for hours and hours, and there's other topics that maybe we can discuss, but thank you guys for spending the time and getting deep.
Well, I think that this really shows the redemption of God, because that 10% may have only been 10%, but it was a big wedge. I mean, it was a lot to overcome. And so with the revelations that we had that we were able to apply and just God working, it showed the redemption. Because it's like, I think for any parent, you easily focus on the things you've done wrong and you wish you had, do-overs. But God can just turn it,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it really shows redemption to me.
Well, thank you guys both for coming on here and having this conversation. And thank all of you guys for listening and bearing with our interruptions and all of our fun stuff.
Well, since you decided to come on camera, hey Bobo, can you tell us who Jesus is to you?
I don't have to.
No.
You're right, you don't.
You're right, you don't